Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. Join us each week or when you can. We enjoy exploring wellness concepts and reminding you to make time for wellness.
This is episode 62.
We hope our territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people within a reconciliation process. We're on the Haldeman Tract, located on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land.
It's another week of Let's Be Well Together podcast. I'm Julie Wilson, and I'm here with John Webster.
Hey, Julie.
Hey, I'd like to know what's on your mind today.
I would like to talk about one of the articles I sent over to you. And this one was kind of an interesting one. When I read the title, it didn't unfold the way I expected. So this is an article from The Atlantic. It's called What the Longest Study on Human Happiness Found is the Key to a Good Life. It's by Robert Waldinger and Marc Schulz, and it's dated January 19th, 2023. When I sent this to you, did you have a guess as to what a long study would find would be a key to a good life?
I loved the title, and it definitely drew me in, and I thought, the longest study, this has to do with the physical environment, nature, something like that. That's what my initial reaction was.
Yeah, that's what you were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. For me, I was thinking it would be some connection between physical health and maybe on like physical fitness type stuff, but with an edge towards spirituality. So maybe meditating, something like that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, that's a totally different perspective.
We were both wrong.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a neat surprise to find out, and I'll just read it. The Harvard study of adult development has established a strong correlation between deep relationships and well-being. And then the question is, how do you develop deep relationships? So it's a lot about relationships.
And connections.
And then we were talking off tape, and you were saying how it kind of made sense in the context of what we just went through with COVID.
Exactly. I think a lot of individuals have taken the time during COVID, or maybe they were forced to take a look at themselves, take a look at their families, and start to realize that we've lost some of these connections, and we have to start putting those back in place. Even for us at work, right? Getting back into the office, seeing individuals, it's so important, those connections you make. And those connections lead to a deeper understanding of each other, trust. I don't know what you think about this, but then that just leads to a certain loyalty and just wanting to be with those people, right? When you build those relationships and those connections.
One of the things the article talked about was the physical reaction of good relationships. Just imagine, especially if you've been stuck by yourself for a while, all of a sudden you're with your friends, a really good friend, and you're having a great conversation. Just imagine how you feel, like physically.
You feel awesome.
In so many different ways.
Yeah.
Those connections are amazing. And I'm going to come back and read just kind of the catchline conclusion, which you can really appreciate after COVID, because during COVID, you couldn't nurture relationships in the same way.
No.
You couldn't build them in the same way. They were still there and you could still talk to people, but it wasn't like that deep nurturing. What this said is, after doing the longest longitudinal study on human life ever done, and it brought us to a simple and profound conclusion. Good relationships lead to health and happiness. The trick is that those relationships must be nurtured. And I think that's where I see the point of you referencing connections, because when you're connecting, that's when you're nurturing.
Think of little children or babies too, and that whole concept of nature and nurture, and just how important it is for us to nurture babies so that they can grow and develop into little human beings who can look after themselves, who think, it's just so important, those connections.
It's interesting. It's like you're kind of suggesting that a relationship is like a baby and you have to nurture it and watch it grow.
Yeah.
And the other thing that kind of was in here was this concept of, they talk about social fitness, kind of like physical fitness. You can't get physically fit by doing nothing, nor can you be socially fit.
Exactly. It takes work.
Right.
And you see the benefits from that work. And Yes, you have to reach out to friends sometimes, to family members. And, there's a lot of organization sometimes. But in the end, think of all those times when you've been with a group of friends or family and you say, oh, we have to do this again sometime. And this goes back to your point about you see the benefits right away because you want to continue that relationship, that friend, and keep saying, let's get back together. Let's do this again. Let's not leave it so long the next time. And unfortunately, I think we get caught up then in work and every day. So then you realize, oh yeah, this does take work. It's not as easy as, oh, let's get together again next week, right? But how important it is and how good it makes you feel should lead us to put more effort into it.
The thing that struck me too in this article, which I really liked because we talk a lot about introspection and self-awareness. So the way they had to do the study, they would have to meet with people and they would ask them questions. And essentially people were being required to look at their relationships, sit back and take a look at how their relationships are going and where they're at and how they've been nurtured maybe, like we're talking about. And that in itself turned out to be a really great exercise. And so one thing they said when they were talking about social fitness was that it's good to devote time and tend to the connections to help thrive, but finding the time for this type of reflection can be hard and sometimes uncomfortable, yet it can yield enormous benefits. And that tied into something I was talking to Al Torgman one time about the 4 quadrants in terms of where we spend our life and what's urgent and what's important. And a really important quadrant is things that are important but not urgent. And we don't spend enough time there because the point there was that there are things that you should do to think about how you're going to move forward in your life or how you're going to approach things. A whole bunch of the introspection that we do is in that quadrant where it's not urgent, but it's important. And this is essentially saying that sitting back and reflecting on where you are with your relationships is an amazing exercise. It's not urgent, but it sure is important.
I also think that ties in with the whole physical fitness because part of that self-reflection is, and I think in the article they say, take a look at the mirror, right? And there you're getting not only, you're physically looking at yourself going, oh, yeah, that needs some work. But if you take that moment to pause, there's also the mental aspect to it, as you said, right? Of let's stop and take a few minutes to think about what's really important.
I think just generally that whole discussion we had with Al about those 4 quadrants, it was so enlightening to me because it's so true. There's just so many things in life where we need to stop, take time to reflect, take time for introspection or whatever it happens to be. And yet it's really hard to find that time. Mm-hmm. And so we have to make time for it because it's really important. Now, I think both of us, the other thing that really struck us was some of the statistics on how loneliness can be so physically dangerous to it. I couldn't believe it.
Gosh, the study that they talked about in there, and I think you were going to mention, it was startling, just the numbers.
Yeah, so it says, for example, that loneliness has a physical effect on the body. Didn't know that. It can render people more sensitive to pain. It can suppress their immune system. It can diminish brain function and disrupt sleep, which in turn makes an already lonely person even more tired and irritable. And research found that for older adults, loneliness is far more dangerous than obesity. Ongoing loneliness raises a person's odds of death by how much?
26%.
26% in any given year.
Like, that is astonishing.
Yeah, you often hear about a couple who'd been married for decades and one spouse passes away and the other passes away not too long after. And, I always wondered what that connection might be, but this might be one explanation. The loneliness is having a physical impact on their body, their immune system, and everything else.
I truly believe that. My grandparents, my grandmother, when they moved into a home, she was such a social person before, and she was so vibrant. And they moved into a home, and all of those connections, those relationships, she lost them. And John, the downhill, how quickly she went downhill was it was so sad. And if I could have been there to spend more time with her, but it's not just me, it's her other friends and other relationships and connections she had. She missed those. And you just saw the results.
I mean, I wouldn't have guessed relationships when I was trying to figure out what kind of the key to happiness is. But now that I hear it, now that I read this, now that I think this, it makes perfect sense. And there's a really good upside to it too, which is we can nurture relationships. We can take time to introspect. We can think about how our relationships are developing. And if things aren't going perfectly, we can think of ways to try and turn things around. And one last thought I would have, not that I'm trying to end it, so if you have more, go ahead. But one last thought I have is I've been trying lately to, a lot of times something will happen, and whether it's a relationship or something else, but let me put it into that context. Somebody does something and I'm not happy with what they did, right? So part of me is like, you know what? I don't want to talk to them. Just whatever. I'm not going to talk to them again. If they talk to me, fine, but I'm not talking to them. Like that's kind of the old me. But now, I give myself a bit of time to be not too happy about what happened, but then I sit back and think, like, what's the next thing I can do? How can I turn things around? And by the way, what part of it was me? Like, how did I contribute to whatever misunderstanding we had or whatever thing? And I'm finding that it's hard, but it's also being a bit more rewarding.
To actually talk about it. And because you've had a connection with, and if it's with someone else, you had a connection there with that person in the first place. So why don't you want to work at it? And as you said, if there's something that goes wrong or something that comes in to put a little block in that connection, why don't you want to resolve it? Because exactly. And you had that connection in the first place.
And the good news is that's kind of the rarity. And it's so if you can figure out ways to nurture a relationship that's gone a bit south, then we know it's a lot easier to think about ways to nurture relationships that are already great. So I like this article. I like this thought. And I think I'm going to try and figure out how I can take a little time out, get into that quadrant once in a while and think about how my relationships are going and how I can nurture them.
I've already thought of a few friends I need to connect with.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Today's interview is in many categories of wellness, including social, physical, and environmental. We're asking Chef Kay Miller about food in the context of respecting the environment. So welcome, Kay.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I met Chef Kay Miller at a Feast for the Senses event at the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery. A chef and a sommelier get inspired by art, and lucky guests like me get to taste the food and wine that they prepare and select. And Chef Kay's food was delicious and celebrated nature, traditional methods, and respect for our planet. So I couldn't resist asking her to be on the show. Kay works as a local activist in Guelph, Ontario. She was a founding member of the Justice for Workers branch in Guelph, and after leaving that organization, Kay started an anti-poverty coalition focusing on societal issues that cause and compound aspects of poverty. Most of her time is spent cooking for and creating initiatives to feed Guelph's most disadvantaged people. And prior to outreach work, she was employed as a chef and menu consultant for some of the busiest places in Guelph. Now, during the pandemic, she saw the true nature of people, which shook her, and she decided to work within the not-for-profit world because worth cannot be measured by wealth. She sees her skills as better used working within a system for people versus a system driven by profit alone. And then turning to our topic, Kay, if I could just set up our discussion. So after years of eating too much food and the wrong kinds of food, I started eating healthy. And I came to appreciate how much nature nourishes wellness, including through food. Our planet offers sustenance in so many flavors of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds and herbs and spices and other real food. I'd like to better understand how to respect the environment and work with what nature offers to us. And you've lived in that world and you've been doing that. So I'm curious, what are some of your thoughts about how we can do that?
That's a very interesting question. I like how you posed it because we're living in this world right now, and it's a beautiful time in our history. We have all vegetables, fruits, spices at our disposal. We've never been in a position like this in all of history, yet we're having this discussion. There's constantly this discussion on food insecurity. And it's ironic to me because individuals in third world countries that do have much more constraints than us, they're not having this conversation. Yet we have all of these vegetables and fruits and beautiful things at our fingertips, yet we are not able to access them. So that's something I've been spending a lot of time looking why that is. And the large factor right now is that while it's available, it's segregated. So eating healthy is definitely based on socioeconomic status. While I think everybody is aware that eating healthy is good for them, there's these factors that stop them from accessing that. And the major part is wealth and income disparity. Food is expensive. Time is very little. We live in a hyper-industrialized time right now where individuals are working 2 jobs. We don't have the time to process the meals, to grow our food, to process the food, to cook healthy meals anymore. In fact, we've been so far removed from that process, our understanding of basic cooking principles is completely gone. It's a scary time because we have all of this available to us. That's why we're seeing the food waste. That's why we're seeing 1 in 5 families hungry right now, is because of this huge disconnect between having the food available and individuals accessing it. What I see to fix this issue is to kind of move backwards. We've reached this industrialized stage. That's fantastic. But we've almost gone too far. We need to move the process back to more simple roots, looking at more sustainable methods, companion planting, replenishing the soil, very, very simple things that they've been doing forever, but they don't fit within our current model, which is very much a capitalistic model. We've exploited everything from nature to people, which comes to the point of like the time constraints. So we're exploiting people's times, their family life, their outside life. And then in addition to that, we're exploiting the world around it. We're just taking from the soil. So our food doesn't contain those nutrients if we do get to them.
So, Kay, could I just interrupt for a sec?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so you mentioned companion farming, and that reminded me of something. We had a Three Sisters soup, which was an indigenous dish, and it contained corn and squash and beans. And I understand after that, because I started looking into it once I heard that term. I noticed that all over the world, those 3 elements are often combined in indigenous culture. And I heard that they do companion farming in the sense that they grow all 3 of those crops together because for some reason it helps each other when they grow together. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yes, definitely. It's been made popular by the indigenous culture because of all the fantastic light that's been put on this culture in media. It's actually a term that's used all over the world. There's different terminology for the same concept. And basically companion planting is just thoughtful planting.
Okay.
So it's a very beautiful concept. And basically what you're doing, all plants can assist each other in some regard. So some plants will kind of deter pests. Some plants will create ground cover so that the roots are protected from the sun. And they can all kind of work around each other. It doesn't have to be specifically the squash. It doesn't have to be specifically the corn. There's several different variations in all cultures around the world of what to plant with each other so that they kind of help each other grow.
You made a lot of really amazing points. I can't hit them all, but a couple things come to mind. So at one point you talked about process. We don't have time to process. And I think what you were talking about was in the context of time to prepare meals the proper way and cook. I often talk about process in the sense of processed food. And, you know, something that you were saying reminded me that one of the songs I keep singing on the podcast is that it's unfortunate that all the ads I see are for processed food. You go to the store and most of the store is full of processed food, not real food. And even in third world countries, I've been reading that a lot of people are becoming overweight and out of shape because they can't afford real food and they're eating processed food. And so that's a big thing too for me. And I think it's something you touched on, the importance of eating real food as opposed to the processed food. And the problem is it's so darn expensive, and it takes both time and money, and people don't seem to have either to eat the real food, the real healthy food, and prepare it.
Yes, a very valid point. And this is a spin-off. This is a result of the hyper-industrialization that we've seen. It's extracting that profit. We've convinced folks that this food is better for you, it's cheaper, it's more accessible because of marketing. If you convince folks that this is better than the homemade items, it's cheaper, it's more accessible, it's easier, then your profits are going to rise. And that's fantastic for them. And we're learning now that home-cooked meals are more expensive, more time-consuming, but vastly more nutritious for you. However, our society has moved to a point where it's very difficult to process the food. And I mean process in a different way. As a chef's perspective, you're taking the raw ingredients and making it into a meal. That is not cost-effective. Even in the industry, it makes more sense to order in processed foods and you save on labor. The problem there is, it's the key point here, is that the focus is on profit and what financial gain there is.
That's both in the industry that supplies the food and in restaurants and that type of thing.
It's the whole society in general. It's how we've kind of created our system around this. And it's every single aspect. It's restaurant, it's home, it's within the workplace. We can't look at food and nurture out of a profit lens. It will never work. Profit is for business, for economics. Profit should not be the measuring factor for nutrition, humanity, extending that to housing even. There are some aspects of society that we need to leave profit out of.
Yeah, and I don't know what the answer is. It's going to be challenging, but like, for example, I have this whole theory about many areas of wellness and having to work on all of them. And let me give you a little snapshot of this real food side to it and how it kind of ties in for me. So I think I was living in a haze for most of my life. And I'm also somebody who studied philosophy, so I tend to be a little intellectual as opposed to attached to the real world. And I think for a lot of my life, I just thought, oh, this is really cool. Science is going to come up with all these amazing flavors and ways to make things and do it more efficient. And then I kind of woke up from that when I started eating healthy in a couple of ways. So I'm like, my gosh, this food tastes so good. Like putting a little thyme in or some oregano, it tastes so good, so much better than before. And then I started smelling the food when I was cooking it. And I was starting to get this experience that was broader than just the eating. It was the smells, the sights, the way it made me feel, a healthier feeling. And so I think you're right. It doesn't tie directly to your point about profit can't be the main thing, but it's part of it. Getting back to real food, getting back to nature, working with the planet. These are all things that we can build into a holistic type of wellness instead of just making money or something of that nature.
Yes, no, 100%. All of these issues are intertwined. They all feed off of each other, and you can't just look at one issue and address it and solve it without looking at this myriad of other issues that are influencing it.
And it does sound like a challenge, but have you, in your world and living in it, have you thought about ways of how we might be able to, as you say, move backwards and adopt more traditional farming methods?
Yes. And it comes from both on an individual basis as well as a larger societal basis. I think both parts need to operate in unison. I do believe that the onus doesn't go on the individual for not being able to eat healthy, for not being able to buy the organic food. It's unfair to expect, say, a single parent to be able to buy organic meals and these beautiful, well-prepared meals for their kids in realistically a 20-minute time frame because they're working 12 hours a day or whatnot. It's unrealistic. However, our systems are never going to change unless the individual is pressing for that change. So they both need to work in unison.
When I started, we're actually toward the end, so I'm going to get to our last question in a minute, but when I started, I said our interview was about multiple areas of wellness, and I mentioned 3, social, physical, and environmental. But having listened to you, I think we have to throw in economic in there as well, because all of these things have to work together. And I agree with you too, like so many things, whether it's saving the environment or working on the initiatives that you're talking about. Yes, we can each do our small part in our little house, in our own lives. It's really important to do that small part. But it's also really important to figure out how we can work with other people to achieve larger objectives on a greater scale. So I like that thought. Okay, so we're toward the end. We ask every guest the same question in a context where we all have areas of wellness that are important to us, but not enough time to focus on all of them at any given time. It's essentially a mini wellness check-in. Are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of even one thing that you could do to foster wellness in that area?
100%, yes. It's not a little thing, it's a big thing. I oftentimes neglect myself. I am a single mother. All of my attention goes to my daughter. Everything I do is for my daughter. And second to that, I work in non-for-profit in, like I mentioned before, the most vulnerable of Guelph. So my problems take second, third, fourth down on the list because I'm confronted with all these very real problems. And very often I forget to take care of myself as I need to. There's a popular saying, when you're on an airplane and turbulence starts happening and the oxygen masks come down, you're required to put your own mask on before you help somebody else. And that is so fundamental because you cannot help somebody else if you yourself are deprived of oxygen. So you need to keep that in mind. And I need to keep myself healthy and in a well-minded state, and then I'll better be able to help everybody. The ways I'm doing that is I just do little nice things for myself. I make sure that I eat. I actually schedule lunch in for myself, and I watch what I eat too. If I don't have time, I make sure I pack in small nutrient-dense bites. If I do have time, then I make myself a really nice meal. Little things just to kind of treat myself once in a while.
One of the nice consequences of doing this podcast I wasn't expecting is I start to hear themes and I start to learn things and about themes. And there's a few points to make just briefly based on what you've just said. We do talk about that analogy. I think it's a great one with the mask dropping and oxygen. And second, the last interview I did was somebody who works in the not-for-profit world and is helping people. They also said the same thing, and I've heard this from several of them, is that I give all my time, like I can't stop. I'm trying to make this real difference in the world, and I can't stop for myself. And then I also hear that same message from moms. A lot of the moms are saying, I don't have time for myself. Someday I will. And you hear all these things, and you just hope. And by the way, sorry, another point too was that we were interviewing somebody who helps moms by helping them with kids who have different conditions. And she said that it's incredible how if a mom in a family starts to feel better and be more well, it has a positive impact on everybody, like the whole family all around them. So all that said, I really wish you luck in taking some time to help yourself, to get stronger, to get oxygen, and then start shining with all the rest of your family and doing great.
Thank you.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. The update for you is that the fan on my furnace is now humming in a steady major sixth interval, which means I have a tuner anywhere I go in my apartment. It's also kind of annoying, so time to get some WD-40, take care of that at some point. On the musical side, though, totally different area, here we go. My friend McGaunt, with whom I used to be in a band called Emissivity, super cool band, super fun times, very talented guitar player and producer. He's studying in Scotland right now, and he's had a sound design project. And he sent it over to me to check out as a work in progress. Now, sound design is really neat. It's a wide field. This one was a video game scene. But sound design is also used in, movies, TV, cartoons. It's all over the place, right? This particular scene, the idea was it was from the perspective of a player in a video game, like a first-person shooter game. And in the scene, the gun that your character is holding shoots like a laser beam, and this gas tower thing explodes. There are some people shouting, but the whole thing is mute. And so the sound designer's job is, of course, to fill all the appropriate sounds in there. So everything from the laser gun pew 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 sound to the explosion, to the chatter in the background, to the ambient noise. After the explosion, there's probably going to be some smoke and, sort of sounds. All that stuff has to go in there. Footsteps, breathing, clicking of gear on your person, all that sort of stuff, right? So he sends it over to me in progress, and it was really cool to see from the mute track how far he had come. It sounded and felt very much alive, like a professional video game. And he was basically just saying, did I miss anything? Second set of ears and stuff. And I'm no expert, but I'll check it out. I thought he nailed pretty well everything. Like, it seemed really perfect. And then the only thing that I thought might set it apart was after the big kaboom. Maybe there was a bit of an ear-ringing tinnitus effect. And he thought that was a cool idea too, so he was going to play with that. But I just wanted to share how cool of a field that is, sound design. It reminds me also, as a quick side note, when I was in school, I remember one time coming out of a rehearsal space for an ensemble practice, and there was a guy with like full mic equipment and pop filters and like the big headphones and stuff. It looked hilarious. He was standing right next to the door, hovering over this water fountain. His name is Chase. I was like, Chase, what are you doing, man? He goes, I'm trying to get a water drop sound effect. I was like, that makes a lot of sense now. But the lengths that the guys will go to get the perfect, most pure example of a sound that can later be used in sound design, such a cool area of music and sound. Anyway, that's my little spiel for this week. Hope you're having a great week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We love our listeners and thanks for joining us. Please help spread the word about Let's Be Well Together podcast. Follow us and rate us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at lets.be.well.together and let your friends know about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
Hello, everyone. It's Elise Seifert here, joined by Sheila Webster.
Hello,
Hey, Sheila.
Elise. How you doing?
Great. We're here to talk about a social media post that we found.
Okay.
So this social media post is all about finding motivation to work out, and it's posted by Very Well. So I was thinking that we could start by going through each point and reading the 6 points that they have here about how you can find motivation to work out, because it can be really hard to get motivated to get started.
I think it's one of the hardest things to do, just getting there,
Totally.
doing it. Yeah. And then when you're done, you're so happy.
I know. It always feels good. And I think that's a big part of what pushes me to work out.
Mm-hmm.
But let's see. So here they have 6 points. I'll start with the first point.
Okay.
So the first idea is to begin by working out for a more active lifestyle.
Number 2 is make exercise a regular part of your day.
Number 3 is to find purpose more than your fitness goals.
And 4, create your own experience.
Number 5, do what feels best for you.
And number 6 is try interactive classes.
Awesome. So some great ideas here.
Yeah.
Sheila, I know you're very motivated to work out. My whole life, I've always remembered you always working out.
I know.
So do any of these resonate with you to help with your motivation?
Well, definitely, I think begin by working for a more active lifestyle. I think that's me in a T, really. And when I finished my dance studio and was looking, trying to figure out what to do, I really made a point of trying to find a job that was active. So that is, I can't sit and sit at the computer. I needed to be active. And also, I think it's just really great to be moving my body while I'm working, I feel like I'm productive as well as physical. So that probably is the one that resonates with me. What about you, Elise?
The most important point for me would be to make it a part of your daily routine. So number 2, making exercise a part of your daily routine or a part of your day. I think once I make sure that I have that time dedicated for my workout and I know that it's not a choice, this is something that's just a part of my daily routine, I think it helps me to make sure that I get it done.
Yeah.
And I know for me, making sure that I do it first thing really helps me in my routine.
I know that John found that too, that doing it early in the morning, doing it first thing, that it really helped with the rest of his day.
Totally. I find it just sets me up for such a great rest of my day. And then I get to the end of my workday and I think I already did all of the hard stuff of my day.
Mm-hmm.
I worked out, I went to work. Now I just get to relax.
Yeah, you deserve it. Yeah, that's great.
Exactly. I know something that came to me probably later was number 5, which is do what feels best for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I first started working out, I really tried to push myself to do what I thought was the best kind of workout or the hardest kind of workout. And that is so not necessary.
No, or what you're expected to do, or exactly. I think yoga really helped with that, like trying to be aware of what your body is doing, even leg to leg. You know, if you're doing 3 sets on your right, like you don't have to do 3 sets on your left if you're feeling anything different. I agree with you. Do what feels best for you.
Oh, yeah. And then sometimes I do some workouts where I don't think I'm working that hard. For example, I like to do dance cardio classes. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I just am feeling the movement. I'm just going through it. And then I check my watch afterwards, which tracks my cardio. Mm-hmm. And I'll see that my heart rate was really high.
Oh.
And I think, I didn't even feel like I was working out. Mm-hmm. So finding those kind of workouts, I think are great. Something that is fun.
Yes, for sure. Something that you just makes you happy. Yeah. I have something interesting to say about create your own experience. So I have a truck that I have to drive all the time. And this was I was doing it because it was cold out, but I wasn't dressed incredibly warm. So I have to put gas in the car every single day.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So it takes like 5 or 10 minutes to pump the gas. And so there's a little bit of a ledge at where the gas is. So I started doing step classes while I'm pumping the gas. So I do, you know what I mean? Like 10 leg curls and step up with one and then step up with the left and then I do like side. It was warming me up, but also got my heart rate going. I was like so enjoying it that the gas was done. I was like, oh shoot.
Who likes pumping gas?
I know. No I hate pumping gas. So this just made it a little bit of fun. So I created my own experience and I also made exercise part of my day. So I thought kind of fits in both of those. Yeah. So do what you do and try and make it fun and interactive and creative even. Create your own experience. So hopefully you guys all have a little bit of fun this week with your Move That Body.
There's a thought. Popped up while running. I just love music. And I love music from all over the world. And so I could do this same exercise for any country. I could list the voices or music of people in different countries that I so appreciate. But for today, I'm going to focus on some Canadian voices. I was listening to a playlist while running, and a song by Justin Bieber popped onto my playlist. His voice is just so naturally wonderful. It's so melodic. His singing feels so effortless, and it's so pure. And then I thought of other Canadian singers, and I can't list them all, so don't take this as exhaustive or excluding other people. But I thought of singers like Sarah McLachlan, Celine Dion, Michael Bublé, and others. These people are born with such beautiful natural singing voices and no doubt had to put a lot of work into making them even better. I really enjoyed the moment as I scrolled through a list in my mind of these amazing Canadian voices and hearing them in my mind as I did that. A really fun and enjoyable run. It's me.
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
John and his quote list. John and his quotes.
Here we are.
Quotes,
flip side, John and Sheila.
It's even worse now because I used to have to find them. Like I'd find them in strange places and I would add them to a list. But these days with social media and because I like quotes,
they're showing up.
It fills my social media, whatever reels or whatever they are. I get quotes all the time. Okay, so here's one that I love. And this is a theme we talk about so often in the show. Mm-hmm. And it's just really well said. It's by Sigmund Freud, who's a psychiatrist. And he says, one day in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. Yeah. Which sounds counterintuitive, right?
It does.
Like,
Yeah.
Oh, the struggle making it hard. It's hard. I'm struggling. I don't feel good. But when you look back, those are the things that you remember, and whether the outcome was perfect or not.
Just the fact that you got through it, that you lived through it, and that you learned from it. And yeah, definitely it's memorable.
Can you think of some examples of struggles?
Well, one that comes to mind is financial struggles.
Yes,
when the kids were little. I remember one Christmas, we didn't have that much money and we were definitely on a budget. And so I had a certain budget, I don't know what it was, to buy Christmas presents. And that was really hard. I had to think hard about what I was going to get them and how I was going to make it bigger than it was. And then Christmas came and they had such a great time and they were so excited about their gifts.
Well, isn't that true with kids? Like you're like, oh, you're looking so hard for this one little thing and you give it to them, they play with a box.
Yeah, I know. It was just like, I do remember looking back at that. I felt like, wow, it really is about the love and the joy and, the Christmas spirit type of thing more than the actual gift itself. So I do remember that.
When we got married, you were a student, I was a student. We had very little money.
Yeah.
And, lots of people told us it wasn't a good idea to get married and all that stuff. And then we had 2 kids and they said, now that's even a worse idea. We weren't thinking of it in that context, like financially, but it was a struggle.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't actually feel like it was a struggle in the sense it was hard to make ends meet, but I didn't feel like, oh, my life is terrible.
No.
But I think it's kind of cool now. Like when I look back, for some reason, I look back very kind of romantically about that time in our lives. Mm-hmm. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful for sure.
And I also now appreciate more that, now that we have some money, I kind of savor it a bit more, like we can actually buy that and I'm still frugal, right?
Yes.
So there's lots of good that comes out of that struggle.
Definitely. And you always talked about starting to run being a struggle.
Yeah, and that's something I talk a lot about in my book, Accidentally Well. I never liked running my whole life. I hated running. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, actually I started going for long walks and then the idea of maybe starting to jog got into my head, but I just remembered I always hated it. Mm-hmm. And so then I found a way to do it, focusing on my heart rate, but it was really hard, right? Mm-hmm. And so I often tell people that when they're like, oh, I don't like running, and I'm like, that's cool. Don't do it if you don't want to do it. But just so even to this day, I run a lot, but it's the hardest part is the first 1.5 kilometers. So let's say the first 10 minutes, that's the hardest part of any run still to this day. Mm-hmm. It, for some reason, takes about 10 minutes before my breathing and body kick in. Mm-hmm. But also, I remember going out and trying to run 3 kilometers and coming home and just flopping on the couch, completely exhausted. And
right.
oh my God, how can I do this? Mm-hmm. And I like to say that there's this struggle that you go through, and for a while you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then all of a sudden you come out the other side of that tunnel.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, I'm so glad that I kept going in those hard times because now it is beautiful.
Yeah. You look back at that and thinking, wow, that's what I think most about when you're going through the struggles. You look back at it thinking like almost proud of yourself, like you're your own hero.
That's
that kind of thing, right? Where you're like, I did it. I was able to push through even, your emotional issues or relationship issues that you have, you pushed through and you became a better person for it.
I think that's exactly it. Because I've been struggling a bit, honestly, because when I think back a struggle, and the quote talks about it being beautiful, the struggle, I'm like, I can't really think of an example where the actual struggle was beautiful. But you're absolutely right. The point is, I think it happens a lot in these situations. You doubt yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't think you can get through it.
No.
You don't know that it's worth it.
No.
And you find a way. And that finding a way, it gives you such confidence then when you run into other things and you look back and you're happy with yourself.
Yes.
I think
that's the biggest thing.
You shine a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
It's sign-off time. It's Elise Seifert here with Sheila Webster and John Webster.
Hello there.
Hello.
Hello. It's another week. It's actually a shorter week this week because we have our Easter holidays coming up this weekend. So that's pretty exciting. For me, I'm just focusing on maintaining my routine. Something special that I did do over the weekend was I went on a maple tour, which was pretty exciting. So we went on a tour that included a meal, and then we could visit 6 different sugar shacks throughout the area that we live in.
Wow.
So they ranged from people who are just hobbyists. So they might just have their own little shack on their property and just make enough maple syrup for themselves and their family to people who mass produce maple syrup. And I learned a lot. I imagine whenever you're making maple syrup, you tap into a tree and have kind of a tin bucket attached to the tree.
Yeah.
But I learned that there are a lot more technologies that they use now. So they have tubes.
Yeah, that goes straight in. Yeah.
Bucket. So I learned a lot, and I felt like it was a very Canadian thing to do.
It was.
It is. Maple syrup. Gotta love it.
It's really awesome that you got to go to different ones. You got to see them from small to big production.
One of them, which was quite a large one, we got our own personal tour. This man was standing there and he said, "Oh, I grew up here. How about I give you a tour?" And it was just myself and my husband. And we walked around with him and we got to ask him all of these questions. And it was phenomenal. It was a really wonderful experience.
So cool.
How about you, Sheila? What do you have going on this week?
It's a short week. I'm going to be working 4 days though. So that's kind of odd for me because I usually only work 3 days a week, but I'm working all 4. So even though it's a short week, it's a long week for me, but that's okay. I had a great week last week. I basically call it my social week. On Tuesday, I went out with high school friends. And then on Thursday, we went out with dance friends and we saw a talk with Evelyn Hart. So Evelyn Hart is a ballet, prima ballerina from the Royal Winnipeg that was kind of in my era. So that was really interesting and being close and personal because there was, I would guess, maybe 50 people at this talk. So it was very personal and it was fun to see the girls. So that was really great. And then on Saturday, we had people over. And on Sunday, we had a meeting for the wedding. And it was a closing meeting, just closing all the loose ends, making sure that we've got all the financials reorganized and all the categories paid and, all that kind of
Seating
stuff.
charts.
And seating charts. Yeah. And the food and just everything. And it was really productive. We kind of all agreed on stuff and we got everything done, which was pretty exciting. So the wedding is coming up really quickly. We're going to enjoy this Easter weekend and then 3 weeks later. So what about you, John?
I did so much of that wedding planning.
John did nothing.
Well, I would have agreed with you guys if I was there. It sounded like it was a good meeting.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
In terms of last week, I just want to mention that I had a great Saturday. I've been trying to get more people involved in the podcast. I want to open up the discussion, more people. And we have a couple of university students who came over on Saturday. Isabel Sinclair, who we have interviewed a while back, she's going to be more of a regular co-host. And she came in and did some sessions. And Sierra Fletcher, who was on last week, is going to do some too. It was great. It was a really good feeling to open things up with more people and more perspectives. Now, in terms of going forward, I'm a little stressed out because as of tomorrow, I become the president of our region law association. So I'm going to be busy, right? So I'm going to have work, podcasts, law association, exercise, wedding stuff, lots of stuff to do in the world. So I'm a little bit stressed out. Last night, I woke up in kind of in the middle of the night. Thought I'd go right back to sleep, but I started thinking about all this stuff to do.
Yeah, it's like things are just overlapping a little too much right now for him.
Yeah. Now, the good news too is, like Sheila said, we get our condo back. We're going to go up to the condo on the Easter holiday. Kids are a lot older, so we've got a lot more freedom. And I'm going to really enjoy getting back up to Collingwood and hopefully have a nice walk along the water, have a few moments of peace before the craziness starts.
Well, I'm excited about going swimming and playing ping pong.
Right, because you like playing ping pong now. Elise, you're going to have to come by so you and Sheila can play ping pong.
Yeah, we're very good.
Well,
not at all.
Well, we're getting better. Getting better.
Okay, so there you go, people. Have a great week. Hope you like the show, and we'll see you again.
Happy Easter. That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.